Hello, in this video we're going to write a simple calculator. So we're going to use command line arguments from the user to read in a mathematical operation. We will then calculate and print out the result. So let's get started. In Eclipse I've created a new Java project called Calculator, and to this we will add a class also called Calculator. The first thing we'll need inside our class is our main method. And finally, we write a program that makes use of our parameter to our main method, which is the command line arguments. Now in Java, we get our command line arguments from the user as a string array, which makes them really easy to deal with. And that's what we're going to demonstrate in this video. However, the first thing we'll need to do is, as it's always the case if we're reading input from the command line, is to print out some instructions if the user gets it wrong. So what we're going to do is, the way we are going to use our program is like this. Java calculator, and then our mathematical equation. For example, 1 plus 2. And then our program will read this in and print out the result. Now, the way our command line arguments work in Java is we get an array of strings separated by white space. So what we would have inside our command line arguments if we ran this program is an array that looks like this. These are strings, plus 2, like that. So what we need for our program to work are 3 command line arguments. So we're going to print out an error if we don't have 3 arguments inside our array. Now remember, this is just like any other array. It just happens to be filled with command line arguments. So we can use if args.length does not equal 3, we print out an error. Usage. Just like that, and then we'll exit. Now, we can continue now, because if this is not true, and our program didn't exit, then we have the right number of arguments to actually do our calculation. The first thing we will do is declare an int variable that will store our result. So int result, and we'll initialize this to 0. Next up, we're going to figure out what our operator was, because that changes what type of mathematical operation we do, obviously. So to do this, we're going to use a switch block. And what we are switching on is our middle command line argument, in other words, args at index 1. However, remember that switches only work on primitive types, so we need to convert that to a character. So the way we're going to do this is args at index 1 dot char at 0. And now we have a character representing our middle command line argument, which is our operator. So next up, we're just going to have a look at what this is and then calculate the result as we go. So if the user entered a plus sign, then result equals. Now remember that all of these are strings, so if we want to do mathematical operations, we need to convert them to numbers first. So we're going to use the integer class because it has a static method called parseInt, and our first operand, which is our first command line argument, plus our third one, which is index 2, which is our second operand. And then we're going to break. Just like that. Now I don't know why Eclipse has kind of made the formatting a bit ugly, but there you go. That's better. So what I'm going to do next is just copy and paste this 3 times for our other operations. So plus If they entered a minus, we're going to do a subtraction, obviously. Oops. Next up, we will do our dot. And the reason we're using dot for multiplication is that most consoles, use star to represent a wildcard. So just to make things easier for us, we're going to use the dot to represent multiplication. Division though, no problem. So next up, we will print out the result. Now you notice there's a possibility that the user entered some rubbish here for the operator instead of a valid mathematical operator. We're not going to worry about that. If that's the case and they entered something garbage, then we're just going to print out 0, which is the original result. So we can just print this out. So we're printing out the full equation. And that's all we need. So we can run this now, but rather than run it from inside Eclipse, I'm going to run it from a command line because Eclipse is a little bit tedious when it comes to having command line arguments. So here's a command line. I'm already in the folder that's storing our Java classes. So if I type ls here, you can see we've got our calculator.class, which is exactly what we want. So Java calculator. Let's try out our error first. We get our error message, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do next is test this out. Java calculator 4 plus 3 is 7. Perfect, that's exactly what we need. Let's try minus. Yep, we get 1. Let's try multiplication, which again we're using dot. We get 12, that's perfect as well. What about division? Remember, this is integer division, so it gets rounded to 1. We don't have any decimal places. But, you know, if I wanted to do 12 divided by 3, we get 4, which is perfect. So with that, that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.